Welcome back to another Culture Kit assembly video here at Connect Tribe's Benteh STEAM Academy. I'm Sam, the Benteh STEAM Academy in-house videographer and video instructor, and in this video I get to be the one to guide you through how to assemble this month's Culture Kits, the Beaver Fur Mittens. If you haven't already had the opportunity to check out Thomas's unbagging video, head over to our channel to check out that video so you can see what all comes in this month's kit. Otherwise, let's jump right in. To enhance your learning experience, I would encourage you to pause your video whenever you need time to complete a step, and to use our hyperlink chapters in the video description below to replay any missed steps. Before we start, let's quickly review what we have. In your kit, you should have one pair of leather scissors, one needle, several bundles of sinew, 6 black binder clamps, one piece of traced leather, one piece of traced felt, 2 beaver fur packs, and a thimble. And if you've noticed any of these items missing from your kit, please have your parent or guardian contact the Benteh STEAM Academy staff member so we can get you that missing item. Okay, so you ready? Let's prep our area to work on our mittens. The first thing that we want to do to prepare is to make sure that we cut out all of the traced leather and traced felt items to make sure they're ready and all the scraps are put aside. Make sure you're being safe because this is the opportunity that you're going to get to use your leather scissors for the first time. So if you do need extra support, have a parent or guardian help cut those traced items out. Otherwise, take your time and follow the lines. Good luck. Alright, so now that we have our pieces cut out, let's have our felt pieces and leather pieces placed nicely within our workplace by laying out all that we need so it's easy to access. I like actually having space immediately in front of me to have clear and designated as my workspace, and then all of my material kind of spread amongst the outside of my workspace so it's easy to grab and move forward. So the last thing that we should do to prep for our mitten making activity is to actually thread our needle. So we're going to take the needle that we have in our kit, the one that we gave you might actually have a very small needle head, but we're going to take our sinew and we're going to thread a strand of sinew into our needle so it's quick and easy to start our project. Again, take an end of your sinew. You're going to find the head or the hole in the head of your needle, and you're going to try and thread the needle. That is trying to poke the head or the end of your sinew through the needle. This may take a few tries, so take your time, and if you need extra help, ask for help from your grown-up. And for me, I got a little piece through the head of my needle, and I'm gonna actually pull that piece to see if I can have all of it be pulled through all at once. So let's give that a try. There it goes. So we've threaded the needle, and this will help us start the first step in our activity. So once you have it threaded, let's go ahead and move on to step number 1. Okay, so in this first step, we're going to be sewing the palm and finger liners, which is your felt, together. As we're actually going to find the indents, there should be a little indent that you cut out from your palm and your fingers, and you're going to line those pieces up. So there's my indent there, and I'm going to bring my other indent over, and we're going to line these two up. Once we have them lined up, we're actually going to start by anchoring our fabric. So we're going to go ahead and take our needle. We're going to find the starting area. For me, I'm going to start on the corner edge of the two that are lined up. And we're gonna push our needle through. Again, being careful of our fingers on the other side. We're gonna find that spot, we're gonna push it through. You should see my needle coming through there. Again, this is our threaded needle. You should have already threaded your needle. We're gonna pull it through almost all the way. Remember, this is the start of our strand, so it's pretty long. Before we pull it all the way out, we're gonna leave a little bit left so we can tie a knot. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do this one more time. We'll grab two little knots tied right into our anchor. And we're gonna jump into our stitch. There we go. So we should have this tied in. You can either cut this end off. I like actually sewing it down with the stitch that we're about to do, so it's just gonna get sewed down right into the top portion of our glove. So the stitch that we're gonna do today is the locking stitch or the blanket stitch. So we're gonna pick a side to feed the needle through and the side to receive the needle. And to create this stitch, what we're going to do is feed the needle through the side we've chosen. There we go. We're gonna pull the needle through, pulling our thread through. And we're gonna pull it through very similar to what we've done before, but we're going to leave a little loop. And to create this locking stitch or the blanket stitch, once we get this far into creating our loop, again, pulling it all the way down to right about there, we can go ahead and feed our needle through the loop and pull that shut. Okay, so we're pulling that loop shut. Now I'm leaving little bits of space between my two stitches. In fact, I'm probably leaving very small amounts of space in comparison to some. This is my first time making mittens, so for me I've chosen to make kind of smaller gaps within my stitch just to make a nice tighter stitch, and I'm keeping somewhat close to the top of the material. I'm coming down probably about maybe a 1/16 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch, pushing into the fabric, pulling again straight through. So again, putting it in the side we've chose to be the feeding side, pulling it through the receiving side, going down to a very little circle and then feeding my needle through that circle to create our locking stitch, and then pulling that locking stitch shut. So you're gonna go all the way around until you get toward the bump of that thumb, and we're gonna talk about how we tie off the thumb, and that's where we're gonna stop with this. All right, and we should be to a point now where we have, again, from the corner all the way to the bump of the thumb, we have these two now sewn together. I've got right up to that bump, and you should see a little area where I can just shove my thumb in, right? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie off this knot, because now we are done with putting these two together. So I'm gonna go ahead and do what we've been doing, and that is that locking stitch. However, this time we're going to create kind of a double knot or a triple knot with this locking stitch to make sure it is tied off and knotted nicely so we can move on to our next piece of our mitten. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and, again, find that area that we're feeding through. So I've been feeding through one side and then tying on the other. So we're gonna feed through this side. Again, being careful of the needle, not poking ourselves. You may have poked yourselves a couple of times. That's okay, it happens to all of us. It's definitely happened to me. Again, once I feed through, we look for the circular loop that's created. We're gonna feed our needle through and we're gonna pull that almost closed. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually feed it through there one more time. So, 2 more times. So now we've created that loop, we fed it through. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it down so it's very little. And I'm gonna go ahead and feed through again. And we're going to feed through again. We're going to pull that nice and tight. And so it's created itself a little knot right on top of it, almost small enough that now it's pulled inside the fabric. But we should be good to go ahead and cut that end off. There you go. So go ahead and make sure you're done sewing both of these felt pieces together. Again, from the corner, right, of this palm and thumb, or fingers and thumb, all the way over to the bump of that thumb. And we're going to make sure both of these are sewn together like such. Right, so at the end you should have a left and a right, one for your left hand, one for your right. If you open it up, that starts to resemble a mitten. You should be able to put your thumb inside both, and you almost have yourself a Muppet. So go ahead and do that with the felt, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so now it's time for a quick tip. We've talked so far about the starting of our stitch, how we anchor our thread. We talked about the type of stitch that we're going to do, and we've also talked about how we finish a stitch once we're done sewing together two pieces. One thing we haven't addressed yet is how we continue a stitch if we run out of thread. So for instance, right now I have a situation where I'm running out of thread. And I have this needle here that's still attached to my thread, and in this particular situation I'm about to run out. So let's talk about how I'm going to continue this stitch if I'm running out of the sinew that I started with. What we want to make sure of is that we're going to finish out with this piece of thread the same way we would finish out if we're done sewing two pieces together. We're going to go ahead and tie a normal knot like we would when we're finishing a piece. So you're going to feed it through. You're going to do your locking stitch, and before you pull that locking stitch, you're going to knot it once, twice. I like to do it 3 times, and then pull that knot nice and tight. And then once you get that knot, then you're going to go ahead and cut your thread. Now if you have any extra thread, or you can leave it on. Then you can go ahead and take your needle out. You're going to thread a brand new piece of sinew or thread. You're going to anchor that brand new piece of thread or sinew right next to where you finished off that last piece of thread. Once you're done anchoring it, you're going to continue on the stitch like you normally would. Fairly simple in how we continue that stitch, but it's a really important tip to know if you end up running out of thread. So again, if you're running out of thread, go ahead and tie that piece of thread off and anchor a brand new piece of sinew and continue on stitching. Okay, so step number 2 will be simple. As we're taking what we've done with the 2 felt pieces before, and we're doing the exact same thing with this 3rd felt piece, that is the back of your mitten. Take the back and the sewn piece together that you've created, and we're going to sew these 2 together, again from corner to corner, all the way around, so it almost creates yourself a nice little felt mitten. We're going to go ahead and anchor our sinew. Once we're anchored, we're going to go ahead and sew all the way around the entire edge of the backing. So it attaches both, again, the finger and thumb to the backing. Go ahead and try that now. Once you've connected the backing felt pieces to the finger and palm felt pieces, let's go ahead and move on to our next step. For step 3, we'll be sewing together the leather palm and fingers. And because we're sewing with new type of material, it's time to talk about using our thimble too. This step should feel similar to our very first step where we sew together the felt palm and fingers. However, with this step, there are some significant differences. So let's discuss before we get started. The first difference is that the leather happens to be a tougher material than felt and will require more force in order to push our needle through it. Luckily, the thimble we provided in the kits should help us achieve that pushing force needed to be able to stitch our leather together. Next, the leather material has two distinct sides, and it will be important for us to distinguish which side is which so that we stitch them in the correct orientation. On one side of the leather, you have a very somewhat bumpy, textured side that is a bit shinier than the other. I'll refer to this as the outside face. On the opposite side of that same piece is a soft and smooth side, which I'll refer to as the inside. To ensure we line the material up correctly, take a finger and palm piece and place them together so that both outside facing pieces are now facing inwards. After placing the leather pieces together with the outside faces turned inwards, ensure that the thumbs and the bumps on the thumbs are aligned. Before we talk about the thimble, thread your needle with a new piece of sinew. The thimble will be used to help push our needle through the tough leather. Please don't hesitate to ask your grown-up for help with this if you find that this next step is extra challenging. Also, your grown-up may have some experience or ideas on how to better use a thimble, or they might be willing to learn how to use one with you. Let's start by placing the thimble on our hand that is pushing our needle through the material. This for me is my dominant hand, so for this example, you'll see me using the thimble on my right hand. Also, people I've seen using a thimble will often place them on their middle finger. For me, I found it most helpful to place my thimble on my ring finger instead. Now that we have our leather lined up properly, both pieces with their outside faces aimed inward and lined up at the thumbs, a needle threaded with sinew, and our thimble on our needle pushing hand, either on the middle or ring finger, let's start by pushing our needle through our leather for the first time. Similar to the felts, I'm going to push my needle through at the corners of my leather and work my way around to the thumbs. Once I get my needle through, I'm going to anchor my thread like I've done before in steps 1 and 2, and then work my way over to the thumb using my locking stitch. Remember to take this part slow and easy, and stay extra aware of where your needle is coming through when pushing it through the leather. My favorite technique is to begin with the side that I'm pushing my needle through, push it just enough so I can bunch up the leather around the needle, pinch the needle between two fingers so that when I push the needle through, I'm pushing it between two fingers and I don't have to worry about accidentally pushing it into a finger. After you've completed your first set of leather, finger, and palms, go ahead and complete sewing the next set of finger and palms. Great! Now that your leather, finger, and palms are sewed together, let's move on to step 4. Step 4 is the second to last step before we have a completed pair of mittens. And in this step, we get to start working with the beaver fur. During this step, we will continue to use our thimble and we'll start using our binder clamps. Start this step by threading your needle with sinew if you don't already have a piece threaded. Now, let's take one of the leather finger and palm pieces you just completed sewing and place it together with the beaver fur backs. How we're going to line these two pieces up is by placing the fur side of the beaver back against the outside, or the shiny bumpy side of the leather, so that the soft side of the leather is facing outward and the non-fur side of the beaver hide is facing outward in the opposite direction. Lastly, make sure the bump cutout in the beaver fur matches the thumb side of the leather piece when you put them together. If they don't match, try swapping either the beaver fur piece or the leather piece until they do match properly. Once you have a matching pair, we'll start by using our binder clamps to secure the two pieces of material together, while also trying to make it so the fur is pushed down between the leather and the beaver hide. After lining the two pieces up, let's go ahead and use the thimble to push our needle through and start the anchoring of our thread. Once anchored, let's go ahead and work our way around the outside of the mitten until we run out of sinew or we get to the other corner. Okay, so I'm about to start working on sewing this next piece of leather to this fur backing. But before I do, I want to go ahead and just quickly go over something that I learned after sewing my first mitten, and that is where I'm going to start this time around in comparison to where I started on the last mitten that I've done. Last mitten that I did, I started on the corner and worked my way all the way around the mitten, as I mentioned before, except for this time I'm actually going to start right on the thumb. I'm doing this because last time I noticed that when I started on the corner, the thumb was actually not properly aligned. So this time I'm actually going to plan to do it from the thumb. So I'm going to quickly show the bump or the indent. So I'm going to start here on the thumb. I'll anchor right there on the thumb. And then I'm just going to work down and then close off on this end. And then I'll start on the thumb again, or right on that closure, and then I'll work my way up and around. I'm starting a little different just from learning from the last time, starting from my indent or the bump on the thumb, and I'm just gonna work my way down to the bottom. I'll tie off, and then I'll start again right here on the top portion of that bump, work my way up and all the way around to the bottom, and then tie off. And then I should be ready to turn this guy inside out. I'm taking my threaded needle, here it is. I'm gonna go ahead and thread it through right on the thumb. So again, I'm gonna make sure they're lined up, and that's why we have these clamps. So I'm gonna get my clamp real quick. I'm gonna try and get some of this hair tucked. And one thing I've been using that's been helping me tuck my hair, if I've not been having success getting this tucked into the fur, is I've been just using this little cup of water. So this cup of water is gonna help me. I'm gonna use this, and I'm gonna just dip my finger in real quick, and I'm gonna kind of comb that hair back. And the water kind of helps keep some of that hair contained. There we go. And once I get some of it contained, I'm gonna kind of push it back down behind the leather as much as I can. There we go. It's actually pretty well contained. At this point, I'm gonna grab the clamp, and I'm gonna put the clamp a little bit further down because I'm gonna go ahead and anchor my thread right up here. And now that I have it set, I'm gonna move my water out of the way. I'm gonna get my thimble, and we're gonna push through and start our first anchor point. Wonderful. At this point, you should have completed your sewing of the leather fur backings to the proper leather pieces. Now, what we're going to do is turn the newly sewn pieces inside out, and voila, you have a mitten. Do this with both of your mittens, and then place the felt inserts into the mittens. And once you've done this, we'll move on to our final step. You've made it! The final step. Our step 5 is going to be using the same stitch we've been using this entire project. And we're going to use it once more to stitch our lining together with the exterior of our mitten. Simply thread your needle with sinew if you haven't already, and take one of your completed mittens, both the inserts and the exterior together, and begin by choosing a side to feed your needle through. This step is going to be us lock stitching around the end of the mitten to tie the exterior and interior parts of our mittens together. Like the 4 steps before, push the threaded needle through the material, anchor your thread, and begin to stitch around the wrist of the mitten, closing off your stitch when you've completed this. Hopefully, if you've made it here to the end, you've had the opportunity to finish your mittens, and I'd like to congratulate you if you did. If you're still working on them, keep up the hard work. This project isn't an easy one, but it's an extremely rewarding one when you finish it, because it makes a really great gift for loved ones, or they can be a really great personal pair of mittens. Either way, my hope is that this instructional was helpful enough to guide you to completing this month's kit, and I hope you enjoyed learning this new skill, or reviewing an old one. I know I loved learning how to sew with you. With that said, I want to thank you for following along, and hope you'll be able to join us for next month's kit. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified of new videos that we release. Until then, from me and everyone here at the Benteh STEAM Academy, we'd like to wish you and yours a happy holiday and an even happier new year. Great work, and remember, keep creating.